Crime is a significant social problem in the United States. As we will see, the U.S. has one of the highest murder rates among industrialized nations and incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. In this presentation, we will look at what we know about crime in America and discuss what may account for our high degree of violence. There are many different kinds of crime. Violent crimes refer to murder, assault, rape, robbery, and burglary, and are the crimes used to create the National Crime Index reported by the FBI. Violent crimes are most often perpetrated by the poor in our society, just as the victims are also most often poor. But there are also white-collar crimes, such as insider stock trading and embezzlement, corporate crimes, such as pollution or business malfeasance committed by corporations and businesses, public order crimes, such as prostitution, public drunkenness, and traffic violations, and professional crimes, such as the activities of organized crime families, professional shoplifters called boosters, or scam artists. The good news is that crime rates, which again means violent crimes, have been falling over the last 25 years. There was no one reason for this decline. The two most likely factors are an increase in the size of local police forces that began in the Clinton administration, and a correspondingly large increase in the number of people imprisoned in our jails. Crime is also not evenly distributed across the country. Contrary to what many people believe, the region with the least amount of crime is the Northeast, despite the presence of large cities like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. The region with the most crime is the South. The elevated levels of crime in the South is associated with the fact that the South also has the highest levels of poverty in the nation. Despite the decline in violent crime, the United States continues to have a large number of homicides, with the highest murder rate among societies comparative to ourselves. Canada, for example, reported a total of 543 homicides in 2012, for a rate of 1.56 murders for every 100,000 citizens. The U.S., by contrast, reported 12,765 homicides, or 4.67 murders for every 100,000 citizens, about 3 times higher. The U.S. murder rate is about 6 times higher than Japan. Sociologists debate the reason American culture is so violent and has such a higher murder rate. We can't really blame it on violent media, since Canada and Japan both have exposure to the same violent movies, music, and video games. In part, the violence is due to the heightened emphasis upon individualism in American society that elevates the individual above the needs of the community. Americans tend to be much more concerned with themselves than each other. It is also due in part to a long history of violence in American culture. We resort to fighting as a means to settle disputes much more often than other people in the world. And it is due in part to the easy availability of guns. There were many methods used for committing murder in the U.S., but, as this FBI data shows, nearly 70% involved the use of firearms. There are an astonishing number of gun stores in the United States, reflecting the fact that American culture is a gun culture. Americans are 5% of the world's population, but possess over 50% of the world's guns. As of 2009, there were 310 million privately owned firearms in the U.S., enough to equip every man, woman, and child. While violent crime is a terrible problem in the U.S. and ruins lives, white-collar and corporate crimes perpetrated by educated professionals from the upper classes actually cost our society more money. Bernie Madoff, a stockbroker who ran an illegal Ponzi scheme, scammed people out of $50 billion. The recession in 2008 to 2009 was largely caused by U.S. investment banks who knowingly sold worthless securities around the world, bankrupting entire countries and sending the global economy into a prolonged slump that cost Americans trillions of dollars. However, white-collar and upper-class criminals are rarely prosecuted and, if convicted, generally receive lighter sentences. The U.S. response to these heightened levels of violent crime has been to incarcerate large numbers of people. The United States has more people in prison than any other country on earth. For every 100,000 citizens, we imprison 5 times as many people as England and 12 times more than Japan. Incarceration rates have risen dramatically over the last 35 years. 60% of these inmates are imprisoned because of drug offenses. While the war on drugs has failed to prevent illegal use of drugs, it has filled our prisons. Unsurprisingly, in addition to having the highest rates of poverty and crime, the South also has the highest rates of incarceration. Racial minorities are also much more likely to be in prison than whites. A black man is almost 6 times more likely to be imprisoned than a white man. In part, this correlates to the fact that racial minorities are more likely to live in poverty than whites. But it is also due to inherent racism in the legal system. Recidivism rates, meaning the frequency with which people released from prison commit another crime and return to jail, are also very high. In the last extensive study by the Department of Justice in 2005, 68% of released prisoners were arrested for a new crime within 3 years, and 75% were rearrested within 5 years. In other words, prison does not change behavior. It simply segregates criminals from the general population. The United States is one of the only modern industrialized nations to still use the death penalty. In 2013, 38 people were put to death, with 17 of those being in Texas. Within the U.S., the death penalty is used in 33 states, including North Carolina. North Carolina has executed 43 people since 1973. Across the nation, there are currently 3,070 people on death row. 63 of them are women. The death penalty is also disproportionately used in regards to race. Whites are 77% of the population, but 56% of those executed. Blacks are 13% of the population, but 34% of those executed. It is impossible to prove that the death penalty actually deters crime. While the U.S. is about the only industrialized nation to still execute people, we also have the highest rate of homicide. Neither is the death penalty cheaper. Life in prison costs less than executing a convicted criminal because of the more complicated and expensive legal processes and prison facilities that are required. A Duke University study found that North Carolina would save around $11 million per year if it did not use the death penalty. In the end, the death penalty is simply a more expensive way to gain revenge. The reason for the more extensive appeals process in death penalty cases is because we know we execute innocent people. Since 1973, 144 death row inmates have been exonerated of their crimes. Between 2000 and 2013, the U.S. averaged over 4 exonerations per year of inmates sentenced to die.